How's it going, guys? Cameron here at the Canadian Gamer, coming at you with another video. Now, today's video, I wanted to just give my final thoughts on Quake Remastered, which I recently did a playthrough on my PS4 Pro. Yes, I have to throw that in there, Pro. I have to sound like I'm an elitist. So before we get into that, I was out yesterday for a bit with my mother. We went into Ottawa, went and got something to eat, went to a few thrift stores. I didn't pick anything up. Well, I did. I picked up a VHS copy of The Deer Hunter, which is a fantastic movie. I had it on VHS before, but my copy was pretty beat up, so I had donated it a few years back, but I found a mint copy at the thrift store, so I picked it up. So you can see here, I took a few clips of some of the things I came across out in the wild. You can see here, I saw a test drive for the PS2. I was tempted to pick it up. I know one of my subscribers swears by it. He says it is a good game, but I didn't pull the trigger on it. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about Quake Remastered. This video might be a little bit long in the tooth. I do apologize. I'm not going to really show any gameplay footage on this video for two reasons. The music that is used in the game, the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack, as well as we'll get into it in a few minutes, but Quake 64 has its own kind of like licensed soundtrack as well. I mean, I don't care really about the monetization, but I don't need the fucking headache of these copyright claims that are constantly coming through. So yeah, you've seen the game before. We don't really need to show gameplay footage on it. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself here already. So just sort of rewind a bit, back in the early 90s, my family, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate, we didn't have a PC for the longest time. You know, if you had a computer in your household, your family was doing really well. We didn't get a computer until 1995, and I think a lot of that had to do with prior to 95, the internet, while it did sort of exist, it wasn't really, where it was at. Basically, what I'm trying to say is once 1995 came around, the internet became more of a thing. Internet providers were popping up, in all the small towns and the bigger cities as well, obviously. So once the internet sort of became a necessity, that's when we went out and got a PC. And when we got the PC, we got the internet shortly thereafter. Now, it was around this time, a lot of you younger folks, you wouldn't know probably what I'm talking about, but you could go to the dollar store and you could get what was called a 3.5-inch diskette. So, back in the day when we said the term floppy disk, that was like the bigger disk. It was floppy. It was flimsy. It was bigger. A lot of the older computers, you'd stick this large floppy disk in. But in the mid 90s, we had the 3.5-inch diskette, and so that was like a smaller plastic diskette. And all the computers had it, because even though the CD-ROMs, CD-ROM drives was quickly becoming the next big thing, a lot of us were still using the diskettes. So when you go to the dollar store, I specifically remember you could go in there and you could get what was called shareware, and the main company that would basically distribute the shareware was Apogee. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember Apogee. And I remember going into the dollar store, and it was like a little kid in a candy store. For a couple bucks, you could get a shareware version of Blake Stone, Alien of Gold, Jill in the Jungle, Commander Keen, Hugo's House of Horrors, all these games, right, that I had never played because they were never on home consoles. And I remember one time I went in there and they had freaking Doom. And I think it was like, because Doom was like such a big game, if you were getting the shareware version of Doom, you had to buy two separate shareware discs. You'd have one disc that would have a couple of levels, and the other disc would have a couple of more levels. And what the shareware disc would do was, like, let's say there was, I can't remember in Doom, I think maybe there was three I don't want to say worlds, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, you go into one section of Doom and you'd have a bunch of levels and then you'd move on to the next. All those FPS first person shooters were like that back in the day. Well, with Doom, you get to play like the first, whatever it was, 10 levels. And then if you enjoyed it, you could buy the full version and then you get all 30 levels or whatever it was, right? So Doom was like a big deal. You get the diskette, and then we had Windows 95, so you'd put the diskette in the computer and then you'd boot up MS-DOS is what we would call it. And like you'd put in like, you'd type it in on your keyboard, like CD : Doom. And then you'd hit enter, and then the directory would come up, and then you would type in Doom again, hit enter, and then boom, it would boot up Doom. So I remember, playing Doom on my computer. I'm like, wow, this is pretty fucking cool. And then at that time, I was buying a lot of PC Gamer magazines, right? So again, this was around 1995. So then the next year, 1996 rolls around, and we start getting a lot of hype surrounding Quake. Now, around this time, Duke Nukem 3D had come out, and like that was a big deal too. And that was crazy at the time because the game looked so good, yet you were able to sort of get it running on, a PC that might not have been of the higher specs because you could run Duke Nukem 3D at a very low resolution. We're talking like 320 by 240, really low resolution, but it didn't matter back in the day. It still looked extremely good. So around, again, this story is getting somewhere around 1996. We start getting a lot of hype for Quake. I'm buying PC Gamer magazines, getting demo discs with PC Gamer. And I remember just seeing a lot of advertisements regarding what was called a 3D accelerator. So it was like a processor, like a chip on a board that you could buy, very expensive at the time. And you could install it in your computer, and it would basically pimp out whatever game it was you were playing. It would give it graphics that were like, all smoothed out, no pixelation, basically like an N64 at the time, but even better. And I remember Quake was one of the first games that really pushed the idea of getting a 3D accelerator. And one of the biggest chips you could get out there was 3DFX, OpenGL, the Voodoo cards as well. But again, when we had a computer, we had what was called a Packard Bell. I think the company went out of business. And the computer we had was an all-encompassing computer. You couldn't open it up. You couldn't upgrade it, because back in the day, we would upgrade the PCs once in a while. When your PC got outdated, you could take it in and get it upgraded. So this was a Packard Bell. You couldn't upgrade it. It was a Pentium 75, so I think a little bit more powerful than a 486. And yeah, I remember PC Gamer magazine. I think I got a demo disc with Quake on it. Couldn't run it. You couldn't run it. Even if you had a good PC, it was hard to get Quake running really well. It was hard to get running. So back in the day, again, we're talking 26 years ago, I never got a chance to play Quake. I didn't get a chance to play it. Our computer eventually became really outdated, obviously, because things were moving at a rapid pace around that time. And then towards, the late 90s, early 2000s, I was in college, sort of fell out of love with video games, busy, maybe not busy, but I was sort of distracted around that time as an adolescent. So here we are 26 years later, and I have the fortunate ability to go into this with a fresh set of eyes, just like I did with Doom 3, what was that, a year and a half ago? Never played it before and went in with a fresh set of eyes. So I get to play, and this is like a real treat for me. I get to go and play Quake Remastered, which is available on the PS4, the Switch, the Xbox One, the modern consoles as well. It's dirt cheap. It's about $10 USD, so it's about $13-14 Canadian. And I was able to boot it up, stream it, play through it. And man, what a fucking treat this was. It didn't disappoint. And, I just want to say As far as level design is concerned, I'm not quite sure who was in charge of level design at id Software when this game was developed. I don't know if it was that Romero guy. I don't know if Carmack had something to do with it. I know this game kind of went through a bit of a development hell, back in 94, 95 when it was being developed. But yeah, the game is really, really, really incredible. When we talk about level design, a lot of these modern first-person shooters, again, it's not the same as it was back in the day. When Quake came out, yes, there was a huge emphasis on multiplayer. Some could even say this was like the game that really spearheaded online multiplayer. But the single-player campaign is really, really good. And you're not going to see level design like this with the care and curation that was involved in developing these levels. They're very memorable, whereas a lot of the modern first-person shooters, let's be honest here, it's just throwaway campaigns, right? A lot of the modern FPS games, it's a multiplayer game, and they're quickly, throwing a bunch of ideas into a melting pot and shooting it out the conveyor belt to try to please those who are looking for a single-player campaign, but really, really, really not that good. But with Quake, the level design is really, really good. The levels have sort of a Lovecraftian design to them. I shouldn't say sort of; they absolutely do. In the first campaign, at the very end of it, you actually fight a boss. It's like this red demon that comes out of a lava pit, and then you have to sort of run up to the second floor. And you have to trigger all these mechanisms in this electric force field that he gets trapped in. He gets electrocuted, and then you beat him, and then you get onto the next campaign. But yeah, no, I when I fought him the first time, I'm like, wow, look at this fucking beast coming out of the lava pit. And this is me in 2022, right? Because the game is so old, but it holds up really, really well. I didn't find at any point when I was playing it that this game felt outdated. I can't say the same about Duke Nukem 3D. I can't say the same about the original Doom. This game looks really good. Maybe not as far as modern day graphics are concerned, but as far as the HD remaster is concerned, Night Dive, I think it is. Night Dive Studios did a really good job, sort of incorporating a lot of modern elements as far as lighting is concerned and shadows is concerned into the remastered game. The only thing that's kind of a disappointment is, I talked about this a little bit on my live stream, but back in the day, there was like a 3D FX patch you could get to run Quake with a 3D accelerator, and I don't think the remastered version of Quake has all of the elements that you could get with a 3DFX card back in the late 90s, which is kind of unfortunate, to be honest with you. The way I was playing it, I had texture smoothing turned off, because when you put texture smoothing on, it makes it look like an N64 game. And I actually find a lot of times in this current day that we're in, when I go back and play a game that's pixelated, I actually don't mind it. I find it gives it a lot of character. It's like when I play Gran Turismo 2 on the PS1. I kind of like the way it looks. I got to be honest with you. I like the way it looks. Can't even fucking speak. But yeah, Quake, the level design is fantastic. I wish there was more boss battles. They sort of tease you a bit with that boss battle at the end of the first sort of campaign, if you will. But then you don't have any more boss battles throughout the game. The final boss is not a boss at all. I thought it would have been a boss. Kind of an anticlimactic ending to the game, but it's still pretty good all the same. The music done by Trent Reznor. I don't know if the soundtrack would be considered Nine Inch Nails or just Trent Reznor, but you could buy that soundtrack. It was released on vinyl. Maybe a year or two ago. A really good soundtrack. Incredible. Absolutely incredible as you're playing through the game. And I can't say enough good things about Quake. It was just, oh man, it's fantastic. I did play it on easy. I did have a hard time in certain sections of the game. Most of the difficulty I had wasn't actually with regards to the enemy encounters. It was more to do with the layout of the level design. Not crazy, but some head scratching puzzles, if you will, getting kind of lost in some of the levels, backtracking to and from. But yeah, all that to say, to go back and play a 26-year-old game in the year 2022 and to be this impressed with it, it is quickly shot up into probably my top 10 games of all time. As far as top 10 first-person shooters is concerned, I'm gonna put this at number 2. I still have Doom 3 at number 1. That's a personal opinion of mine. It's just my personal favorite FPS of all time. Not saying it's the greatest, but I will put Quake at number 2. So I have Quake 2. I know I'm all over the map here. I have Quake 2 for the Xbox 360, and I have played it. And going from Quake 2 to Quake, now I understand the difference. Now I see why Quake 2 wasn't originally supposed to be a Quake game at all. And again, because of some butting of the heads at id Software, they ended up rebranding whatever game that was they were developing and calling it Quake 2. No, Quake 2 is a good game, but it's not Quake. Quake, the reason why I like it so much, very similar to Doom 3, it is a first-person shooter, but you're not constantly, getting into a fucking encounter with enemies. There are slower periods where you're just walking around, exploring the environments, solving puzzles and whatnot. So, yeah, it's just fucking incredible. And just to add to that, Quake 64, along with a bunch of other free DLC, is available to you. All you have to do is create a Bethesda account. And I didn't really want to create a Bethesda account, but actually it wasn't that bad. You just have to enter in your email. You don't have to create a password. It's really simple to do. And I couldn't believe it. It was free. I went in and I downloaded Quake 64. I downloaded all the other free downloadable content as well. But Quake 64, so I ended up playing that last night for about an hour and a half, and I'm actually fucking shocked. I'm shocked. So I don't know who was in charge of the remastered version of Quake 64, but it's essentially the same game as what you would have had on the 64. I think it is running at 60 FPS. But yeah, it's actually really good. It's really good. So what happens with Quake 64, it's a little bit more linear. You're just sort of thrown into the game. You don't get to choose which paths you want to go through, because in the original Quake you'd have these doors, these portals, if you will, and you could start, you have 10 levels here, 10 levels here, 10 levels here. You can go into any door, any portal you want and do it any sort of way you want. In Quake 64, I keep wanting to say Doom 64. Quake 64, no, it's linear. You just start the game and you go right through all the levels from, the beginning to the end. But Quake 64, it's got an incredible soundtrack done by another good composer in the video game industry. No, not Tallarico. Aubrey Hodgins, I think her or his name is. I don't know if it's a female or a male, but the fucking soundtrack is incredible in Quake 64. I might even say it's better than the Trent Reznor 9 Inch Nails soundtrack in the original Quake. It's that good. Quake 64 has very unique lighting, different colors, very vibrant. Whereas the original Quake, the PC game, was just sort of dull and drab, which I don't mind. I thought it fit the aesthetics perfectly. But when you put in Quake 64 and you run that through, it has its own sort of charm to it. It's pretty cool. And then there's a lot of differences as well, like that boss encounter that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. When you run it through, when you play it through on Quake 64, the boss, the demon, the red demon that comes out of the lava, it actually looks better on the N64 The character, the graphics, the animation looks better. So Quake 64 was done by Midway, I believe. I don't think it was just published. It might have been developed by Midway. I could have that wrong. But yeah, I'm shocked by how good Quake 64 is. It's really good. I played maybe a third of it last night and I sort of walked away because you got to imagine, I just ran through Quake and then I run back and I play Quake 64. And as cool as it is to play, I don't know if I want to run through all the same levels again right now. Maybe I'll go back to it again. I did encounter a couple of glitches with Quake on the PlayStation 4. The main glitch I ran into was when you go into the options menu and you can play around with some of the settings. I can't remember which setting it was. I'll have to go back and look, but I clicked on it and all of a sudden a directory popped up on my TV, just like you would see on a PC. You know, it was like C:\/ like Quake, blah, 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 blah. And then it crashed the game. It crashed the fucking stream. I think it might have been, the interface where you can see like your guy, your health, and your weapon and everything at the bottom of the screen. I had it on like minimal and I tried to change it to like full, and when I did that it crashed the game. So obviously there's a glitch that has never been patched. But yeah, no, really, 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 really good. And then on top of that, after I beat the game, I went back and I just tried out some of the DLC that's available that you don't have to download through Bethesda.net, that comes with the purchase of the game. And even the DLC that is there, from what I had played so far, is really, really, really good. Quite different, but really good. One of the DLC downloadable content was like a bunch of new levels that were released in like 2017, and a very, very sort of haunting atmosphere. Kind of looks like Doom in a way. There's candles lit. There's fire everywhere. Very different setting than what you'd get in the original version of Quake. It kind of looked like Doom 2016, to be honest with you. Some of the other downloadable content seems like it's more run and gun approach, kind of like Quake 2. Enemies are coming at you from all over the place. Again, not a slow burning affair like it was in the original Quake. But yeah, no, I can't say enough good things about it. If you're on the fence about it, definitely go out and buy it. If you've never played Quake before, you don't know what you're missing. It is one of the first games to sort of popularize speedrunning, if you can believe it. So there's a lot of players out there that will speedrun through Quake. I'm not one of them, and I'm definitely not going to no death run Quake as well. I died quite a bit playing through that game. But I think it's a pretty fucking good deal that you're getting pretty much all the downloadable content. There's a lot more downloadable content out there on the internet, but you're getting quite a bit with this package, and you're getting Doom 64 for free. And multiplayer as well. You can play it online. So me and Marceau hopefully are going to try to play a little bit of that. I'm going to try to play through the downloadable content campaigns as well. I'm going to try to stream those, and I'm going to maybe start that today. So I'm having a lot of fun about it. I just wanted to sort of talk about it. I know this video is kind of long, but there was just a lot I wanted to talk. I didn't even scratch the surface, but yeah, mainly the level design. It's just fantastic to go through. And a lot of times I would stop while I was playing and just admire the level design. And it's a fantastic game. It's an incredible experience. I'm glad I was able to go back and play it 26 years later and be able to have an opinion on it. I really don't have much bad things to say about it, to be honest with you. Like Doom 3, one of the things I liked about it, it did have a very heavy, well, not heavy, but it had a story-driven campaign, whereas Quake has a bit of a story, but not so much. You can just sort of go in and play it. But man, back in the day, it was a simpler time. It was so much easier to sort of just jump around in the game in a first-person shooter. I did have to tweak a lot of the settings when I first turned it on. Of course, the PS4 controller was configured so it was kind of like a gyro effect. So I didn't realize it when I was playing it. I was like, why is my gun moving all over the place? But it was because the controller, when you move it, the gun would move up and down. I'm like, no, turn that off, turn that off. No, this isn't a fucking PC with a mouse and a keyboard. I wish, right? That's how we would play these games back in the days, with a mouse and a keyboard. But anyways, my camera's running low on battery, so I'm going to end the video here. Quake is fantastic. Highly recommend it. I give it a fucking... Yeah, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, absolutely. Incredible experience. One that I'll never forget. And you can get Quake through Limited Run Games for the PS4 physical copy, but it's fucking expensive. But I'm gonna look for a physical copy big box PC from the 90s just to have on my shelf. I want to get a copy, so I'm on the hunt for that. So anyways, I'm gonna cut it off here right at the 26-minute mark. I hope you guys enjoyed this little discussion piece. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your weekend, guys. Take care.